have a beautiful animal that with such a physique and a strength about them, and then when they're in such a pitiful state, they are totally stripped of their dignity, and then they'll crawl in wherever they can find a shady, cool spot, and they die. It's horrendous. John and I came to Pimpara Lake in 1982. We ran predominantly sheep in the early stages and then moved into Hereford cattle as well. What we've done over the 40 odd years that we've been here is to put in a greater number of watering points throughout the property and therefore reduce the grazing pressure. In order to graze a landscape evenly, the water distribution has to be even, and most sheep will walk 3 kilometres or so from a watering point, but if your landscape is dominated by a single watering point in a paddock, then that's where the livestock will graze, and what you'll find is that the vegetation is eaten out. So our program has been throughout our life here to increase the number of watering points so that nothing has to move more than 3 kilometres or so.
Before all of this area was opened up by pastoralists, there were no dams, there was no bore water, there was no reticulated water, there was no rainwater tanks, and there wasn't a big kangaroo population. And we created a perfect environment for them by, supplying water.
I remember my father telling me years ago that to see a kangaroo was something that was talked about around the dinner table. They were, I wouldn't say they were that rare, but there certainly weren't as many around then, so that would have been the early 1930s. And with increase in watering points and better feed management, the numbers, it's enabled the kangaroo numbers to explode at times. And so it's heartbreaking if you've been fortunate enough to have a storm in dry times, or your land practices mean that you have been able to hold on to some feed for the dry times, which is a natural part of our environment out here, that the kangaroos can come in and wipe out all your feed pretty much within, say, a week, or depending on how thick the roos are.
The other side of that is that when the country turns dry and the water, not just on our property, starts to recede, or dams dry up, or whatever happens, then you start finding that the kangaroo populations you will see start to move in and out. And that's when it really starts to put pressure. I mean, we're already experiencing the effect of the dryness and the effect of our own water being quite a challenge to find. And then you've got the added burden of animals that have just come because they're able to. By the time it gets to that point, most of the kangaroos particularly are in a really pretty bad way, and it is just horrific at the end point of a really, really prolonged hot drought period to see these once beautiful, strong, healthy animals just suffering. It's agonising. They come in and around. We have a little trough right at the house, for example, that attracts wonderful bird life, and I love to see, animals, healthy animals coming in there. But it's heartbreaking to see some of those poor, pathetic animals dragging themselves in, and then because they don't have the strength to go very far away from the water, they end up in your sheds, around your vehicles, under any tree that they can crawl under, and they die. And the stench is horrific. That's just around the homestead.
Two things that happened in the drought: lack of water, lack of feed. Our stock had gone. We'd done the right thing looking after them, but we couldn't do anything with the kangaroos. they then ate every last bit of food, and as the dams dried up, they were getting bogged and dying horrific deaths. And the problem was, when they die, if you don't get them out of that water, because they generally die near the bank, within a day they sink. And I made up a net. I thought, I'm going to do the right thing and throw a net out over them and pull them out, and realised it was absolutely futile. I would never be able to keep up.
It's heartbreaking. It's work that when we're already really, really stressed anyway, that we feel we have to take on, because we can't leave the animals in that bog hole. You just can't leave them to die.
To die of starvation or to thirst is I can't think of a worse way to die. And you know, it may not be that particular animals that you see that day are going to die on your property, but you realise that they're all doomed, and it's a terrible feeling.
We don't want to see them die. We really want to make sure that they can go on and have an opportunity on another place. And we can do that. We can manage the livestock. We can manage the pig numbers. We can manage the wild dogs, which is a continuous thing, but we cannot manage the kangaroos.
With the sheep and cattle, we can yard them up, load them on a truck, truck them out, and they're gone. They're no longer a risk to ourselves and to themselves. The kangaroos, you can't do that. They're here. And it's just, as I said, it's just horrendous sometimes. The stench of a dead kangaroo permeating in the middle of the night, permeating through the house, because they're just outside, you know, it's not nice.
It has an impact. You know, farmers and graziers and people on the land are, I guess, to an extent, are sometimes renowned as being emotionally strong. But I don't care how emotionally strong you are. You know, people that are on the land generally choose to be on the land, and as such, you know, you love your animals, and to see them die like that, especially when it could have been prevented to an extent, it's very hard.
The big issue now is what we've got to face is hopefully we get some rain and we don't have droughts for a while, we can rebuild, we can pay off some debt, we can get into a profitable business again. But the big thing is I look back on what's happened, and the fear is that we go through the same thing again. So as soon as I started seeing kangaroo numbers, I applied for permits to manage the numbers. I hope everyone else is doing just what we're doing and keep those numbers at a manageable level. Otherwise, we'll see the same thing happen again. Another drought, we sell our stock, and those kangaroo numbers out there will escalate again, and then they will knock around the pastures again, and then they'll die another horrific death. Because we know the damage that the kangaroos do to our pastures, and we see the horrific death when they're up in those numbers and the horrific way that they die. And that's in the back of your mind. You know, we might not sit down at our diary when we get home at the end of the day and having a beer and write in, I'm really worried about the kangaroos, but it's that's hanging in the back of your head. And when people struggle with depression and mental anguish, we've got a whole heap of things in our head that's worrying us. And that, even though we don't talk about it openly, it's just one of those underlying things that's in the back of your mind all the time.
I can tell you, I get really quite angry that the responsibility for caring for those native animals that belong to all Australians from wherever, the burden of that responsibility is left to us. And nobody offers, you know, I'll come and help you pull them out every day. Or when we've been hand feeding and you will feed out for sheep and the cattle, and next thing you've got hordes and hordes of kangaroos coming in and eating a valuable food source that we've paid for. Nobody's putting their hand up to say, oh look, you know, we'll help you. But that's the financial side of it. But it's I think deep down, for me and John, it's that through sensible management and clear thinking without the hysteria that's attached to, oh, we can't cull a native fauna. Oh, they're beautiful animals. Yep, absolutely. They're not very pretty when they're dying of starvation.